You might think pirates spent most of their days swinging from rigging and shouting at unsuspecting merchant ships, right? Or that the biggest threat to their survival was a well-aimed cannonball, or maybe the hangover from one too many barrels of rum. But nope, their deadliest enemy wasn't even human, it was their own food. Yeah, you heard me. The real pirate killers weren't sea battles or scurvy swordsmen, it was the grub they ate. Let me tell you something hilarious and disgusting about pirate diets back in the golden age of piracy, roughly between the late 1600s and the early 1800s. Imagine 70 to 100 men crammed into a ship like the famous Queen Anne's Revenge or the Witta, sailing for months with little more than salted meat, hardtack, and questionable water. Those food supplies. Deadly? Believe it or not, 7 specific foods accounted for more pirate deaths than cannonballs, storms, or hangovers combined. And the solutions pirates came up with to fix these problems. Absolutely wild and sometimes downright genius. If your definition of genius includes eating maggot-infested biscuits and drinking what could best be described as seawater with a splash of who knows what. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the culinary chaos that plagued pirate crews and the crazy fixes they used to survive another day at sea. First off, let's talk about the unholy disaster known as hardtack. You might picture hardtack as some sort of miracle food, a simple biscuit that can last forever and keep sailors alive. And you'd be half right, half terribly, horribly wrong. Hardtack was essentially hard, dry, flour and water biscuits baked until they could literally break a tooth. Pirate ships carried about 63-gallon barrels packed with these biscuits, enough to feed a crew of 50 for 2 months at a ration of about £1 per man per day. The problem? Hardtack was notorious for becoming an incubator for all sorts of nasty things: mold, weevils, and the ever-annoying maggots. Yep, even the strongest pirate teeth couldn't crush the hardened shell to avoid swallowing wiggling worms hiding inside. Bad idea. Really bad idea. Pirates tried everything to deal with this, including dunking hardtack in their daily swill of diluted vinegar or rum to soften it. Spoiler alert, it didn't work well. The biscuits often became soggy blobs floating with tiny larvae. Some pirates got creative and ground the hardtack into powder to sprinkle over other food, but that just spread maggots everywhere, basically turning their meals into a science experiment gone wrong. The failure rate: about 75% of hardtack shipments ended up with infestations, turning mealtime into a test of pain tolerance more than nourishment. Here's where it gets interesting though. Pirates figured out something clever. Some captains instructed their cooks to bake the biscuits twice or thrice, essentially carbonizing them to kill off the pests and bacteria. The effect? It was basically edible shipboard chalk. Not exactly a feast, but 30% less likely to kill you via digestive infection. Pirates didn't know it, but this was early food sterilization. And if you think about it, the process wasn't far off from modern drying or baking techniques used for long-term food storage. An anecdote worth sharing involves Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, who famously ordered his crew to discard any hardtack that wasn't as hard as iron. Legend has it he cracked one over a pirate's head during a mutiny attempt, saying, "If it can't crush your head, it ain't fit to feed ye." Next up is the notorious salted meat, mostly pork or beef, known as salt beef or salt pork. Now, unlike the fresh meat you or I enjoy, this stuff was preserved by packing it into barrels with a salt content of around 3.5%, enough to prevent spoilage, but nothing compared to the refrigeration pirates didn't have. The key issue was that if salted meat wasn't properly cured or stored, it turned into a festering, smelly nightmare within days. Pirates on ships like the Royal Fortune often had to eat meat that was sometimes decades old, preserved to a point but prone to dangerous bacteria growth and, worse, botulism, which at the time they had no clue about. Bad idea number 2. Pirates tried boiling the meat several times to clean it or soak it in fresh water to remove excess salt. Spoiler alert: soaking worked unevenly, often leaving patches where mold and toxins thrived. Boiling led to meat so tough and tasteless it was basically chewing on the ship's ropes. Let's just say it wasn't pretty, and many a pirate complained that these meals were less food and more punishment. According to ship logs from the early 1700s, from the Caribbean to the coast of Africa, crews reported mass cases of gastrointestinal distress, likely caused by these preserved meats. Anecdotes mention crews suffering from the flux, a pirate euphemism for dysentery, which could wipe out hundreds of men in weeks. Talk about ruining your fearsome pirate reputation. But the real genius was a method developed by pirates and naval crews alike called red herring, curing, smoking the meat lightly before salting it, which reduced bacterial growth and allowed meat to last up to 24 to 48 hours longer without getting deadly. Not exactly sushi grade, but better than eating rancid pork that could kill you mid-battle. Think of it as pirates' version of combining smoke detectors with a fridge. Pirates didn't understand the science, that smoking kills surface bacteria and slows spoilage. But through trial and error, they stumbled upon a survival hack that actually saved lives. Third on our delicious disaster menu, dried peas and beans. Pirates loved these legumes because they packed protein and carbs into small packages that could last months if kept dry. Each pirate was rationed about half a pound daily to supplement their salted meat and hardtack. The trouble, peas and beans were often stored in barrels that weren't airtight, letting humidity and sometimes even rats get to them. Wet dried beans. Yeah, sounds like an oxymoron, but it happened. This led to bouts of gout and other health issues because wet beans could ferment or sprout without anyone realizing. More dangerously, some batches of dried peas had trace amounts of a toxic fungus called ergot, or, in the worst cases, were contaminated with weevils which can spoil a whole barrel. Pirates tried to deal with this by tossing their beans into boiling seawater to get rid of any pests. Bad idea. Really bad idea, since seawater contains about 3.5% salt, and boiling lentils or peas in it only makes for a salty mush that neither soothes hunger nor outright kills all the bugs. Pirates also attempted hanging bean sacks in the rigging to dry in the sun and catch the breeze. Let me tell you, that didn't just dry the beans, it also let seagulls and crows help themselves, with not so hygienic results. Spoiler alert, it didn't work well, and sometimes entire crews suffered from food poisoning, believed at the time to be curses or witchcraft rather than what modern science confirms as fungal toxins. Here's the kicker though. Pirates learned to toss kernels with a bit of crushed coral or lime powder, both alkaline substances, into bean barrels to keep dampness and fungal growth at bay. Turns out pirates accidentally discovered early food preservation chemistry, similar to how we use baking soda to control moisture today. This method improved survival rates by up to 40%, though they certainly never had EPA approval. A pirate diary from one of Bartholomew Roberts's expeditions in 1721 praises bean sacks fresh as morning mist, which, considering the circumstances, was high praise indeed. Moving swiftly to number 4, rum. If pirates had a national drink, it was rum. Not just for partying or trying to impress mermaids, it was also a key part of the pirate diet and medicine cabinet. Pirates were often issued about 1 pint per day, diluted with water into a mixture called grog to make their water last longer and avoid scurvy. But here's a twist. Rum was also a food killer, just not in the cannonball sense. The main problem wasn't the alcohol itself, but the quality and quantity that led to dehydration, impaired judgment, and accidents aboard the swaying ships. Piling on the failures, some pirates took the bad idea of mixing their ration with seawater during desperate times. Imagine drinking rum that tastes slightly salty. That's pirate grog version 2.0, less enjoyable than it sounds. Spoiler alert, it didn't work well. Crew members became chronically dehydrated and weak, sometimes fainting during battles or walking the plank not because of enemy fire, but because they tripped over their own sea legs. There's a particularly hilarious story about Captain Calico Jack's crew accidentally mistaking a barrel of contaminated rum for fresh stock, leading to a midnight party that resulted in 60% of the crew spending the next day hugging the deck and swearing off pirate life. But pirates figured out something clever here too. They started rationing rum with citrus or vinegar added during storage. Turns out the acidic properties helped kill bacteria and preserve the liquid longer without ruining the kick. Not exactly the mojito you'd want on a tropical beach today, but 70% effective at making sure the rum didn't ferment into something that make you hallucinate instead of sing shanties. This little trick was basically their version of a homemade preservative, science they stumbled upon while trying to avoid spirit rot in barrels. We're just getting warmed up, but you might already be thinking this whole pirate diet was a walking horror show. It was. And somehow these guys still managed to rule the Caribbean seas, or at least look fearsome doing it. But fasten your peg legs because the real food homicide list has 3 more offenders that make hardtack and salted meat look like gourmet delicacies. And wait till we dig into the salty truth about pirate water sources. Trust me, you'll never look at your water bottle the same way again. All right, now that we've wiggled our way through hardtack, salted meat, dried peas, and the holy curse that is grog, let's dive into the final 3 deadly culinary disasters that made pirates wish for a storm or a naval battle instead. Because if you thought the first 4 were bad, buckle up. These next ones will have you raising an eyebrow and maybe reconsidering your lunch plans today. Number 5. Drinking water. Yep, you'd think water, pure and simple, would be the safest bet on a pirate ship, but nope. Pirates had a bigger problem than cannonballs when it came to water storage. Picture this. 50 men, each needing about 1 gallon of fresh water daily to survive. That's 50 gallons a day for just one ship's crew. Enough clean water to gulp down before a skirmish or long haul. Right. Wrong. Water was stored in wooden barrels, but here's the catch. They never cleaned the barrels properly, and the water often sat for weeks or months. Spoiler alert. It turned into a slimy, smelly swamp soup. To make things worse, pirates often refilled barrels from questionable sources. Brackish bays, rainwater catchments contaminated with bird droppings, or worse, barrels previously used to store rum or vinegar that swirled strange flavors and probably bacteria into what should have been refreshing water. The result? Pirates suffered from all sorts of digestive woes, including dysentery, cholera, and other waterborne illnesses that could wipe out a crew faster than a boarding party. Bad idea number 5. Pirates tried disinfecting water by adding sulfur or boiling it at sea. Now, boiling sounds great, but on a pitching ship with limited fuel and time, it was impractical, and the taste was ghastly. Plus, pirates believed that mixing seawater with fresh water in small quantities could preserve it longer. Talk about desperation. You can probably guess how that ended. Dehydration and diarrhea. Not exactly the recipe for a victorious pirate raid. Here's where it gets interesting though. Pirates eventually stumbled upon something clever. They started carrying citrus fruits like limes or lemons, thanks to British naval mandates aimed at preventing scurvy. The acidic properties of these fruits weren't just good for health. They acted as primitive water purifiers, killing some bacteria and giving the water a tolerable flavor. Pirates didn't know about vitamin C's role, but they noticed fewer men got sick when they had access to these sour gems. This citrus water combo increased crew survival rates by about 30%, a genuine lifesaver hidden in nature's candy store. For proof closer to home, the British Navy famously enforced lime rations by the 18th century, earning sailors the nickname limeys. Pirates, always taking whatever they could plunder, adapted the practice and realized that sour, slightly bitter water was better than suspicious seawater sludge. So if you ever wonder why pirate lore is full of grog and bitters, it's partly because they were onto something about preserving their precious water supplies and their guts. Moving on to number 6. The death trap sweet spot, dried fish, especially salted cod. Sounds delicious, right? Think again. Dried fish was a staple because it was light, lasted longer than fresh fish, and gave pirates much-needed protein during long voyages. But dried fish had a nasty habit of being infested with parasites, and if not properly dried or salted, it turned into a festering bacterial buffet. The problem was storage. Fish were often kept in open barrels or bags near the ship's hulls, where moisture seeped in during storms or high humidity. This ruined the drying process, keeping the fish partially wet and inviting all sorts of microbial mischief. Pirate crews frequently reported itching sores and skin infections caused by tiny larvae burrowing into their skin after handling these fish. Talk about a food that bites back. Bad idea alert. Pirates tried soaking dried fish in seawater before consumption to clean it. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. If anything, it added salt, moisture, and a breeding ground for even more bacteria. Some tried drying the fish again on deck, but given the Caribbean's tropical storms or foggy mornings, this was a gamble with fate and salmonella. Here's where pirates showed unexpected savvy. They developed a primitive form of smoking, or sometimes frying the dried fish over an open flame before eating it. The heat killed many parasites and bacteria lurking in the flesh. The process wasn't perfect, but it doubled the safety window for this staple food from just a couple of days to a week or more. Pirates didn't know about bacteria or parasites back then, but they had a sixth sense that fish that make your skin crawl are best cooked like it. Historical logs from the Wida in 1717 mention Captain Sam Bellamy issuing orders that all fish be smoked before eating or face the flogging, a strict but effective rule. Finally, number 7, the sneaky saboteur lurking in every barrel, moldy cheese and other fermented foods. Now, before you start imagining pirates munching on gourmet French cheeses that made Hemingway jealous, let me kill that dream. Cheese on pirate ships was basically a solid lump of whatever curd was left after several months in damp barrels, often forgotten and later discovered by a lucky rat or two. The problem? This cheese was a petri dish for toxic molds, including deadly varieties of penicillium that could cause severe respiratory issues, allergic reactions, and, in the worst cases, poisoning. Pirates had no clue about mycotoxins or what made their noses itch after a whiff of fermented disaster. Bad idea number 7. Pirates tried scraping off the moldy parts and eating the rest, or soaking cheese chunks in rum to mask smells. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The toxins often went deeper than the surface, and some pirates even died from what we now know as aflatoxin poisoning. Let's just say spending hours on end trying to scrape cheese off with a rusty knife on a rocking ship doesn't make for a happy crew. But wait, there's a silver lining. Pirates figured out that cheese stored in tightly sealed oak barrels, away from moisture and light, lasted longer and was less likely to go completely rotten. They also learned to trade moldy cheese for fresh fruits and vegetables whenever they made port, sometimes even paying triple price at Caribbean markets. Early trade agreements involving pirates like Bartholomew Roberts in 1720 included specific requests for fresh provisions, recognizing that rotten cheese was essentially a slow poison. This adaptability improved pirate health dramatically. Think of it as their version of Know Your Farmer before it was trendy. Now all these food horrors might make you wonder how pirates managed to keep going with meals like wiggling hardtack, soggy salted pork, slimy peas, murky water, parasite-ridden fish, and fungal cheese. The truth is, their lives were a constant game of trial and error, with survival hinging as much on luck and improvisation as on skill at the cutlass. But here's the punchline. Despite all this mess, pirates managed to keep their ships sailing and their reputations terrifying. The really ironic bit, pirates probably had a higher survival rate on food than many sailors on merchant ships, thanks to their aggressive rationing, willingness to experiment with preservation techniques, however gross, and their communal knowledge sharing, passed down like secret passwords. Ships like the Revenge and the Fancy set standards for food hygiene that few gave credit for at the time. It wasn't gourmet, it wasn't pretty, but it was enough to keep swashbuckling for years. So, next time you think pirates were reckless, remember they were actually pioneers of food science, the original masters of fermenting, smoking, drying, and curing, all with the dire threat of instant death from bad grub looming over their heads. They turned wiggly biscuit horrors into edible chalk, soaked poisonous fish, and still made it out alive, and found ways to turn rotten cheese and foul water into survival tools. In retrospect, the biggest enemy pirates faced wasn't the shiny gold or the cannons roaring on the horizon. It was the daily, tiny battles against bacteria, mold, parasites, and bad decisions at the dinner table. It's almost poetic, right? There's a reason the phrase "the pen is mightier than the sword" didn't catch on at sea, because really, it was the biscuit maker, the cook, and the quartermaster's ability to keep food from killing the crew that kept the pirate legend alive. And there you have it, 7 foods that killed more pirates than cannonballs, each with their own blend of nasty surprises, terrible ideas, and surprisingly clever solutions. So if you ever find yourself on a pirate ship, remember, aim for the cannons, not the chow, and maybe hold off on the hardtack if you want to live to tell the tale. Because when it comes to pirate diets, the real horror stories aren't about treasure or sea monsters. They're about what ended up on the pirate plate. Arr, me hearties, may your meals be less deadly and your grog always a little less like seawater.